1991. The Soviet Union had collapsed. Moscow was in chaos. In those days, within the walls of the Kremlin, there was a phone traffic that no one knew about. According to claims, CIA agents had established contact with Yeltsin through a secret line. Some say he was a leader serving Western interests. Others claim that Yeltsin actually deceived America to save his own country. But there is one fact. In the Washington archives, 3 classified files from the early 1990s still bear the classified stamp. What is written in these files? And why has no one dared to open those documents for 30 years? If you're curious about the answers to these questions, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Because the story I'm going to tell you today is not just a conspiracy theory, but a reality full of documented events, suspicious deaths, and still unexplained secrets. The story begins in 1989. That year, Boris Yeltsin was an ordinary party member in Moscow. The Soviet Union was strong, Gorbachev was the leader, and no one paid special attention to Yeltsin. But that year, something strange happened. Yeltsin went to the United States as a guest of an American delegation. The official explanation was an educational visit. But the details of the visit are still unclear. Who exactly did Yeltsin meet in America? What meetings did he attend? And why did he start acting like a completely different man when he returned? The answers to these questions lie hidden in a statement made in 2015 by Robert Baer, the former chief of the CIA's Moscow station at that time. In an interview, Baer said, "In 1989, we were in contact with some people in Moscow. I can't give names, but they were representatives of the change that would come from within the Soviets." Baer never mentioned Yeltsin's name. But the timing and connections led many analysts to point to Yeltsin. When the coup attempt occurred in August 1991, Yeltsin's role was seen by the world as heroism. The man who climbed on the tank and made an anti-coup speech became a symbol of democracy. But something else was happening behind the scenes. During those coup days, the CIA's Moscow station was working at full capacity. According to American intelligence reports, a special operation was planned to protect Yeltsin during the coup. In fact, according to some sources, American military advisors set up secret communication lines for Yeltsin and prepared a possible escape plan. Of course, the official statement says nothing like this ever happened. But in 2003, a former CIA analyst named Melvin Goodman said in a documentary interview, "If we had lost Yeltsin, the collapse of the Soviets could have been much more complicated." So, some measures were taken. Goodman's statements later led to controversy, and he never opened up about this subject again. When Yeltsin came to power after the coup, his first move was shocking. He officially dissolved the Soviet Union. This decision was an unprecedented move in history, and America openly supported this decision. In fact, President George H.W. Bush described Yeltsin as the father of the new Russia. But this support was not just words. In 1992, the U.S. Treasury Department sent a large advisory team to Russia for economic reform. This team was led by an economist named Jeffrey Sachs. Sachs and a team from Harvard settled in Moscow and began shaping Yeltsin's economic policies. But these reforms led to disaster in Russia. This economic model, called shock therapy, pushed the vast majority of the Russian people into poverty. Oligarchs got rich, state assets were plundered, and people began to starve. So why did Sachs and his team recommend such a policy? According to some analysts, the answer to this question was a deliberate weakening strategy. Economically collapsing Russia was a way to remove it from being a military threat. Of course, Sachs denies this, but the results are there. In 1993, there was a major crisis between Yeltsin and the Russian parliament. The parliament was rejecting Yeltsin's economic policies and wanted to remove him from office. Yeltsin's response was harsh. He dissolved the parliament and sent tanks in front of it. Yes, you heard that right. Yeltsin used military force against his own country's parliament. This incident was not much criticized in Western media. In fact, some American officials praised Yeltsin's determination. This raised suspicion for many Russians. Why was the West supporting Yeltsin's authoritarian moves? The answer to this question perhaps lies in the fact that Yeltsin was indispensable to the West. because Yeltsin was controlling Russia's nuclear weapons, and the West feared these weapons falling into the wrong hands. Yeltsin used this fear well. He sent a message to the West: support me, or someone might seize the nuclear weapons. In the 1996 elections, Yeltsin's popularity had hit rock bottom. According to polls, only 5% of the people supported Yeltsin, but he won the election. How? The answer to this question is dark. According to some reports, the CIA secretly channeled funds into the election campaign. Time magazine published a cover story in 1996, How Americans Saved Russia. Under the headline, it told how American advisors ran Yeltsin's campaign. But this story later led to major controversy, because CIA interference in elections was contrary to international law. But no one initiated an official investigation. Yeltsin won, and the West breathed a sigh of relief. But in Yeltsin's second term, things got even worse. His health deteriorated rapidly. He had heart attacks, underwent surgeries, and sometimes couldn't attend meetings for days. During this period, the real power of the Kremlin passed to Yeltsin's family and close circle. Especially his daughter Tatyana Dyachenko began making important decisions on behalf of her father. And during this period, a strange name emerged: Boris Berezovsky. Berezovsky was one of Russia's richest oligarchs and very close to the Yeltsin family. According to some claims, Berezovsky had connections with Western intelligence services. It was even said that he was in direct contact with the British intelligence MI6. Berezovsky became very influential in Yeltsin's circle. And in 1999, he played a key role in Vladimir Putin's appointment as prime minister. But the ironic thing is, Berezovsky thought he could control Putin. But he was wrong. When Putin came to power, the first thing he did was send Berezovsky into exile. Yeltsin resigned at the end of 1999. The official explanation was health problems and fatigue. But the real reason was probably his family's safety. Because the corruption during the Yeltsin era was so great that whoever the new leader was, they could prosecute his family. Putin offered Yeltsin a deal: resign, and I'll protect you and your family. And Yeltsin accepted. But was this agreement just a guarantee or something else? Some analysts claim that Putin also had connections with the West. But that's the subject of another story. After his resignation, Yeltsin completely disappeared from view. He rarely appeared in the media, made very few speeches. But one day, in 2001, he said something strange to journalists: "I did what was right for Russia." But not everyone may understand that. These words were ambiguous but meaningful. It was as if Yeltsin regretted some of what he had done, but at the same time was defending himself. But the real big question emerged after his death. April 23, 2007, Moscow. Boris Yeltsin died at the age of 76. The official statement was that he died of heart failure, but some details raised suspicion. A few days before Yeltsin's death, one of his former advisors had a meeting with him. This advisor later said in an interview, "Boris told me that if something happened to him, I should release some documents. But those documents never reached me." This statement sparked speculation that Yeltsin's death might be suspicious. But no official investigation was conducted. Putin attended Yeltsin's funeral and gave an emotional speech. Boris Nikolaevich led Russia through a difficult period. "We owe him respect," he said. But was this respect real, or was it a political gesture? After Yeltsin's death, some documents emerged. These documents partially illuminated his relationship with America. But the most important documents are still secret. Those 3 files in the Washington archives that bear the classified stamp are still closed. What's in these files? Some theories say they contain details of the agreements Yeltsin made with the CIA. Some claim they contain written records of commitments made during the collapse of the Soviets. But these are just theories. The truth may never come out. So is Yeltsin really manipulated by the CIA? There is no definitive answer to this question. But the evidence we have shows at least this: Yeltsin was in very close relations with the West. Were these relations in line with Russia's interests, or with the West's interests? This is one of history's most controversial questions. But one thing is certain: Yeltsin's decisions permanently changed Russia and the world. And today, Putin's authoritarian regime is perhaps a result of the chaos Yeltsin created. Because the Russian people were so tired of the anarchy of the Yeltsin era that they were willing to give up their freedoms for a strong leader. The mystery deepens when we examine what happened in Yeltsin's final years. Between 2000 and 2007, he lived in almost complete isolation. Very few people had access to him. His daughter Tatiana controlled who could see him and who couldn't. Some former colleagues tried to visit him, but were turned away. One particular incident stands out. In 2004, a former Yeltsin advisor named Yuri Bacharin attempted to meet with him. Bacharin later told a Russian newspaper that he was stopped at the gate of Yeltsin's residence and told that Boris Nikolaevich is not receiving visitors. When Bacharin asked why, the security simply repeated the same line. This was strange because Bacharin had been one of Yeltsin's most trusted advisors during his presidency. What was Yeltsin hiding? Or more accurately, what was being hidden from him? There's another curious detail about Yeltsin's death. On the day he died, April 23, 2007, it was also the Orthodox Easter. In Russian culture, dying on a holy day is seen as either a blessing or a sign. Some religious Russians interpreted it as God's forgiveness for Yeltsin's sins. Others saw it as a final irony, a man who destroyed an empire dying on the day of resurrection. But beyond the symbolism, the timing itself raised questions. Yeltsin had been ill for years, but his death came suddenly. His personal physician, who had been treating him for decades, was not present when he died. The doctor was reportedly on vacation. This detail, seemingly minor, bothered some investigative journalists. Why would Yeltsin's longtime doctor take a vacation when his patient was in such fragile health? The funeral itself was a spectacle of contradictions. Putin cried real tears, or so it seemed. Former oligarchs who had fled Russia sent condolence messages but didn't dare return for the funeral. Western leaders praised Yeltsin as a Democrat, while many Russians mourned him as the man who destroyed their country. And throughout the ceremony, those 3 classified files in Washington remained sealed. To this day, they remain classified. Several Freedom of Information requests have been filed to declassify them, but all have been rejected on grounds of national security. What national security interest could possibly be served by keeping 30-year-old documents about a dead Russian leader classified? Unless, of course, those documents reveal something that would embarrass both American and Russian governments. Unless they prove that the greatest geopolitical shift of the 20th century was not entirely organic, but carefully orchestrated. In conclusion, Yeltsin's story is not just a conspiracy theory, but a reality full of documented events and suspicious connections. Until those classified files are opened, we won't know the full truth. But even the information we have shows that Yeltsin's relationship with the West was far more complex than official narratives suggest. And perhaps the biggest question is this: if Yeltsin really was a CIA pawn, what would today's world look like? Would Putin have still risen to power? Would Russia have become the adversary it is today? Or would the world have found a different path? These questions haunt historians and intelligence analysts alike. And somewhere, in a vault in Washington, 3 files hold answers that we may never be allowed to read.